Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We're skipping the usual music intro this week because we are running a little bit late. So on behalf of the National Transit Institute, I welcome everyone and thank you for participating. The National Transit Institute develops, promotes, and delivers training and education programs for the public transit industry in the United States. Today's webinar is based on National Transit Database 2020 Safety and Security Non-Rail Mode Reporting. We are pleased to have as our presenters today Ann Singleton, James Overbeek, and Q&A and chat box assistance provided by Dylan Cullifer. Ann Singleton is a Senior Safety and Security Analyst for the NTD program since 2009. Ann has been involved with several FTA initiatives such as the State Safety Oversight Program, the Commuter Rail Safety Study, and the Transit Bus Safety and Security Program in a variety of roles. Prior to Ann's work with FTA, she was a software instructor and database developer. James Overbeek joined the NTD team in 2015. He is a graduate of Randolph-Macon College and currently works as a validation analyst for the Safety and Security module of the National Transit Database. Dylan Cullifer is an NTD analyst for the NTD team as well. She is a graduate of William & Mary and has been assisting in the Safety and Security module for the past year. Today's presentation will consist of the material, and you can feel free to ask questions at any time. You can do so, please, by clicking on the Q&A icon, which is probably at the bottom of your screen, might be at the top. Click on there. The Q&A box will pop up. If Dylan can answer your question as you post it, as the presentation is going on, she will. Otherwise, any leftover questions we can moderate at the end and answer live. The chat box is also there. I see a couple of people have found it already. Please try to put the questions in the Q&A box instead of the chat box. It's better to have a record of them that way. And then if anyone requests a copy, I can give you the Q&A box text. If you don't have a copy of the presentation that was emailed to you, I will very shortly be pasting the link to download that in the chat box as well. And I think that covers all the housekeeping. So I am now going to turn the presentation over to Ann.
Thank you, Lori. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. The goal of today's presentation is to familiarize NTD reporters with the safety and security reporting requirements and the individual reporting forms. As always, we hope that the knowledge you gain today will make your job easier, and we sincerely appreciate your commitment to safety and security reporting. For those of you that report for purchased transportation providers, which are identified as PT transportation in your systems, or if you have taxi service, the new TX type of service that you may have noticed, please do share this presentation with them so that they are aware of what you're required to report to NTD. This presentation would also be helpful for those that provide data to you or to your department, so feel free to share. So today we will show you how to access the NTD system and navigate through the menus and forms. We'll discuss how setup is achieved and review the safety and security package navigation. I can't talk today, excuse me, navigation. Then we'll also go through reporting on each of the 4 safety and security reporting forms, including completing a typical collision report. As mentioned, James and I are your presenters today. Joe Eldridge, the NTD Operations Center Manager, and Murtaza Naveek, the NTD Deputy Program Manager, will not be joining us today. Here's our contact information. We'll also show this again at the end of the session. If you're assigned safety analyst's contact information is, your safety information is also displayed, or our safety information is also displayed within the NTD system when you look at the safety packages. So you can find our information there as well. If you don't know who your safety analyst is, either James or me, please feel free to contact either one of us for assistance. And with that, I'll give it to James.
Thanks, Ann. First, we have a brief overview of the NTD program. Then we will discuss the website and show you how to navigate the system. In 1974, Congress established the National Transit Database Program as a means to collect information and statistics on transit systems in the United States. The first data was collected in 1979 with paper reports. Since then, the NTD has evolved into the nation's primary source of information and statistics on transit systems. All modes of transportation are included in NTD data collection. Agencies that are recipients or beneficiaries of Urbanized Area Formula Program Funds 5307 and 5311 are required to report data with some exceptions. Both public and private providers are encouraged to voluntarily report, as this will increase federal grant allocation that the urbanized area receives. All reporters designated as full reporters are required to report monthly safety and security events meeting a threshold. Agencies designated as small systems or rural or tribal report safety and security data on an annual basis rather than a monthly basis. Agencies who have requested a reporting waiver due to a significant natural disaster are not required to report for the period of the waiver. The data reported to NTD is used to provide industry performance reports to Congress and other federal agencies and departments, and is used to factor federal funding allocations for the UZAs, which was over $9 billion last year. The data is also used to direct, support, and improve other FTA program initiatives, such as the State Safety Oversight Program. NTD data is also used to generate various analyses of trends in transit safety and security. Data is published annually and monthly and is available to the general public, federal and state agencies, transit systems, media, or any interested parties. Published data can be found on the NTD website under the NTD data link. There are two safety data products, Safety and Security Time Series data and the Safety and Security Major Only Time Series data. How do we validate our data? When an agency submits a form, the safety analyst reviews and validates the report using a combination of various validation tools. In addition to these tools, S&S forms are read by the analyst to compare the event description against data points. If the analyst has questions or requests corrections, the analyst typically returns the form to the agency, but may also call or email the reporters. Once corrections are made, the analyst re-reviews the forms and will approve the submission if applicable. When you make changes to a report, be sure to submit the form. Saving without submission does not alert the analyst to the change. On a side note that we cannot say enough, always notify your analyst when you delete a report and why. We must keep track of each report, even those that have been deleted. Without your notification or an email or call when those are deleted, we have no way of knowing. The various forms and reports have deadlines. The S&S-20 monthly summaries are due on the last day of each month for the previous month's data. For example, the October report is due November 30th. However, commuter rail modes and the Alaska Railroad do not report on the S&S-20 form. The NTD system sends automated email reporting reminders to the safety contact on the 20th of each month. This is not a late notice, just a reminder to report. The NTD system sends automated late notices on the 1st and 5th of each month if your data has not been submitted. Please note that a report that has been saved but not submitted is considered late. When late notices are sent, it is quite common for analysts to receive calls from the reporter saying they know they completed their report. This may be true, but if there is no submit date, the system generates the late notice. So if you get a late notice, please check to ensure all reports are submitted. On the 15th of each month, if data is still outstanding, a third late notice is sent by the analyst. FTA may initiate the delinquent reporter process and add the agency to FTA's failure to report list. If there are extenuating circumstances why you cannot report, please advise your safety analyst. Failure to report required data can have severe consequences and could affect the agency's annual program funding. A failure to report can be submitted by an analyst to FTA for a variety of reasons as you see listed here. Please remember, submit timely reports and respond to analyst inquiries. This is a screenshot of the National Transit Database homepage on the Federal Transit Administration website. On the left are several links indicated by the red arrows that we will discuss on the coming slides. The first of these links is the About the NTD section, which contains an overview of the NTD program, contact information, and help desk contact information. The NTD data section provides access to published data products such as the various time series products, historical and current annual data and profiles, monthly ridership statistics, and the National Transit Summaries and Trends, NTST, just to name a few. Under reference materials, you will find the NTD glossary, policy manuals, quick reference guides, information on training and conferences, presentations and webinars, and an explanation of all the forms used in NTD reporting. Click on either NTD Reporting Tool or Reporting Login to log into the NTD program. Use your business email address and all lowercase letters to log in. Users can change the password as often as they like, but the system requires a new password every 60 days. Passwords must be at least 12 to 20 characters, comprised of at least one uppercase letter, one lowercase letter, and one number and/or special character. If a user ID has not been used for 60 days, the system will lock that user ID. If you get locked out, you may try to gain access by clicking on the Reset Password link located beneath where you enter your login. If you gain access but do not see your usual access level, you can try an unlock request from the Actions menu or contact the NTD Help Desk, your annual analyst, or your safety analyst for assistance. The agency's user manager establishes a person's role in the system. The user manager is also the point of contact if you need to have your user role changed. A person must be uniquely identified in only one role. There are 6 access levels to NTD reporting. These are the CEO, CEO delegate, and the NTD contacts, and these have the highest level of access and full functionality to include the NTD annual forms, monthly ridership, and safety and security data. The main difference between the 2 CEO accesses and the NTD contacts is that the CEOs and delegates can submit the agency's certification forms. The NTD contact has overall responsibility for NTD reporting. NTD editors, shown only as editor in the system, can edit annual forms and can submit monthly ridership and safety and security forms. The safety contact can create, edit, delete, save, and submit safety and security forms, and will also receive reporting reminders and late notices. The safety editor can create, edit, and save, but not submit safety data, and safety viewers can only view data. None of the safety contacts can change annual or monthly ridership data. After entering your login and password, the first screen that appears is shown here on the left. Once you click on Agree to the disclaimer, the boxes for you to enter your username and password are presented. You also see either the Forgot Password or Reset Password accordingly. With the launch of the new Sites interface in September, the first screen will appear similar to this screenshot. However, you may have different options based on the sites you have access to. If you only have access to NTD, or that is the most common site you visit, you can bookmark this site by clicking on the star for faster access in the future. Once you complete the login, this is a snapshot of the default screen. You will notice there are menu options in the blue bar across the top. Below the menu options, you see that various modules within NTD. I'm sure you have also noticed you no longer have to click on records to see these modules. The task menu, which shows you how many tasks are in your queue. Tasks are things that you need to do. For example, one of the tasks you may have is to manage any pending or incomplete S&S reports. The Reports tab will display reports that are available to you. First, click on the category, in this case, Safety. There are two reports you may find helpful here. One is the Historical Lookup Report to view safety and security data reported in prior years. Another report is the Rate Compared to Industry Rate Report, which will compute and compare your agency incidents, injuries, and fatality rates against the industry average per 10 million unlinked passenger trips. Under the Action menu item, there are no actions related to safety data reporting, but you may see actions depending upon your user role. The grid provides internal access to other sites, such as other FTA organizations, the User Management Module, the SSOR for state safety oversight data, and so on. The silhouette is where you log out and you can access your Appian profile and system settings. Now we will review safety and security setup. Safety and security packages automatically generated at the beginning of the new calendar year based on the agency's previous reporting status. Modes and type of service available in the safety module are determined by the agency's P20 form. There are two new types of service: purchase transportation taxi, TX, is a type of service operated through taxi cab providers with a system in place to facilitate ride sharing. In September, any existing DRPT modes were changed to DRTX. The other new type of service is purchase transportation network company, or TN, which is a type of service provided by a transportation network company on behalf of a public transportation agency using non-dedicated vehicles. This change will take place starting in January. If you see any unexpected changes to the modes or types of service, or have any questions about the modes or types of service you see, contact the person in your agency who submits the annual reporting data. If you do not know who that is, contact your validation safety analyst. We will look into it. Please do not attempt to modify the P20 profile, as changes made here can affect all aspects of reporting and may cause data to be deleted. The safety packages give you access to all safety and security reporting forms. Here's a list of all the safety forms. The S&S-20 CEO's Data Certification Form, the S&S-30 Security Configuration, the ability to create and view any S&S-40 major event reports, and the S&S-50 non-major summary report. As I mentioned, from the Home tab, click on the Safety module to view the available safety packages by year. Right now, we still have 3 years open, but 2018 will close shortly. If you click on Folder and Agency in blue on the left, the next screen you see is the Summary View/landing page. If you want to bypass the landing page and go directly to the dashboard where you add or edit forms, click on the pencil at the right side of the package. So this is equivalent to clicking NTD Safety Forms on the landing page and therefore skips a step. You may also have noticed that the former Working message you use to see when making a selection has been replaced with a status bar across the top of the screen. When you open the year's safety package by clicking on the folder I just mentioned, the safety summary view, also called the landing page, displays. When you see a confirmation of the reporting year, your agency ID number and name, your validation analyst name and email address, and your agency's fiscal year information. Below that, you see the form name filter box used to limit which forms you see in the form table below. In the form table, you can sort by any of the columns to help in locating the form you wish. And double-click the column heading to reverse sort. You can also use the browser's find feature by doing Control F and enter the number of the major report you may be looking for. However, you must be on the right page to find it. Remember, you cannot open any of these forms on this safety summary view. To access the forms, you must first click on the NTD Safety Forms button located in the upper right of the screen. Again, if you had clicked on the pencil back when you see the safety packages, you would be brought to this screen directly. When you click on the NTD Safety Forms button, the dashboard is displayed. It looks similar to the safety summary view, but here you can open existing forms and create major event forms by clicking on the File New S&S-20 button. To open an existing form, click the blue form name and number link in the first column. This form table can be sorted and filtered just as we discussed on the previous safety summary view. That concludes the navigation. Let's move on to working with each safety and security form. The first is the S&S-20 CEO Certification form. The S&S-20 CEO Certification form is the CEO's confirmation of the accuracy of the safety and security data for the previous calendar year. The form becomes available on January 15th in the previous year's safety package. The form automatically calculates data and is submitted from submitted reports for the year. Unsubmitted data is not included. The form is due by the end of February of the following year, and only a person logged in as the CEO or CEO delegate can submit the form. Late notices are sent to the CEO. Data reporters should review their data to ensure it matches to the data in the S&S-20. Agencies should also use any in-house reports available to help verify the data. Also, the historical lookup report on the Reports tab may be helpful as it shows incident counts by month. If the data does not match, check to ensure that all safety data reports are submitted. Unsubmitted data is not included. You may add or delete S&S-40s or edit S&S-50 data, and the S&S-20 will automatically recalculate the numbers. Remember to always notify your safety analyst if you delete any data. You or your CEO will check the confirm box adjacent to the data. Then the CEO will be able to click on Submit. Once the form is submitted, it cannot be resubmitted, but the form auto-calculates each time it is opened. This is a snapshot of the S&S-20 CEO Certification form. Please notice that the CEO name and title show this is a screenshot of our test database and do not reflect actual data reported by any agency. This will conclude the S&S-20 data form. And we will now talk about the S&S-30. The S&S-30 security configuration form collects the number and type of security personnel employed or contracted by your agency. The S&S-30 form is completed once at the beginning of the calendar year, and you are not required to update this form during the year. All S&S-30s must be completed and submitted to enable reporting. If you cannot create or edit an S&S-40 or 50, It's because one or more S&S-30s is not submitted. Notice you have a place to enter the primary number of security personnel and the total number of security personnel, which is the primary and secondary added together. Do not leave either of these boxes blank. Below is a list of 7 types of security personnel with 2 columns to identify type as primary or secondary. The primary security force is the one that routinely responds to events and or is assigned to patrol agency property. Please use a count of 0 for the use of local police non-contracted selection. The secondary security force is the one or ones that occasionally responds or responds when the primary force requires assistance. Again, for the use of local police non-contracted, use a count of 0. The number of personnel is reported in full-time equivalent hours. So 1 FTE equals 1 person working a 40-hour week or 2,080 hours per year. Prorate the number of personnel if the person works only part-time providing transit security or they provide security for more than one mode. One S&S-30 is completed for each mode. Please be careful not to double count personnel. The number from the total number of security personnel box from each S&S-30 form should equal the total number of agency security personnel. For example, if your MBPT mode, the total number is 1.5. LRDO mode, the total number is 3. And for DRDO mode, the total number is 0.5. This means that the total security force for that agency would be 5 full-time equivalent. If your security force covers multiple modes, you may use any reasonable method for determining FTEs. That may be modal ridership or the number of employees covering a mode. If an agency contracts for security and pays a monthly fee based on services used, they should determine FTE based on the previous year's total hours worked. NTD allows for only 1 primary personnel type. If your agency has more than 1 type of security personnel it considers primary, report the security force with the largest number of personnel as the primary and the smaller force as the secondary. For further information on the S&S-30, please see the S&S policy manual on the NTD website or ask your analyst for assistance. We will now look at non-major S&S-50 reporting. The definition of a reportable event is a safety or security event occurring on transit right-of-way or infrastructure, at a transit revenue facility, at a maintenance facility, during a transit-related maintenance activity, or involving a transit revenue vehicle. These safety events must meet the single injury only threshold and are related to falls, electric shock, smoke, etc. If the safety event results in multiple injuries, the event is bumped up to a major report. The S&S-50 form also collects the number of non-major fires where there was no evacuation, injuries, fatalities, or property damage, but that still required suppression. Excuse me. There are some exclusions to the non-major events, which are events occurring on bus stops or shelters that are not on transit-owned property, unless it involves a person boarding or alighting, and OSHA events occurring in administrative buildings. The form is automatically generated for each mode type of service at the beginning of each month. This form is required to be completed even if there is a major event for the month, as they capture different event types, and even if there is no data to report for the month. On the form, enter the number of the number of safety occurrences and the matching number of injured parties. Remember that injured means that the person was transported away from the scene for medical attention, regardless of whether they appeared injured or not. Do not include people who were not transported away from the scene for medical attention. Here are several examples of injuries reported on the S&S-20. A passenger is thrown out of his seat due to a bus maneuver and was transported. Improper wheelchair securement and the rider is injured and transported. Transit vehicle door closing on an arm, leg, backpack, or clothing, and that person is transported. A person walking into the side of a stopped vehicle and is injured, which is considered a fall when the vehicle is stopped, and that person's transported. That would be reported on the S&S-20. This is a snapshot of the S&S-20 monthly summary report form. As you can see, there's the column for occurrences and injuries. Two of the categories for injuries on the S&S-20 form relate to securement issues. Securement issues are those related to an injury resulting from improper securement of a mobility device, such as wheelchair or scooter. So they are reported as other in-vehicle securement issue. The other category is other in-vehicle, not a securement issue. These are trips, slips while on the vehicle, or for being thrown from a seat during a vehicle maneuver. Undocumented attempted suicides where the person does not truly make an attempt and the person is transported for mental health is reported on the S&S-20. For example, a person in a transit center may tell an official they want to harm themselves, yet do not attempt to do so, and is transported for evaluation. If no qualifying safety events occurred for the month and mode, open the appropriate S&S-20 form and choose the checkbox adjacent to No Data to Report, then save and submit the report. Remember, do not include injuries due to any collisions or security events on the S&S-20. Again, reports are due at the end of the following month and must be completed and submitted by the due date to avoid an automatic late notice. The S&S-30 and S&S-20 forms can be modified at any time. Some reporters like to enter events as they occur during the month. For these reporters, they can modify the form and save and close the form after each change. Your validation analyst reviews each report for accuracy. If we have any questions, we may return the report to you, call, or email you with our concern. If the return feature is used, the user login listed under the last modified user of that report column will receive the email. And I will now turn this over to Anne.
I'm sorry. Thank you, James. I was on mute. I want to step back just one quick second, if I can here, to, oops, see if I can get this back a couple of slides. Do I have control here?
Yep.
Okay. Just want to come back here and mention one thing with regard to the S&S-20 forms, because I've been seeing this a lot recently in validation. The number of non-major fires down here, even though it says that, we've had several instances, again, where people are taking the number of occurrences from the safety section above and totaling them and putting them down to at the bottom. So if we see that your number of in-vehicle options and let's say right-of-way options are matching in the safety section and the fire section, we're probably going to question it. So just remember that this section down at the bottom is to report fires and not totaling your safety events. Okay. So now we'll talk about S&S-40s. All right, so applicability is the same as it is for the S&S-50s, but we're going to go into a little bit more detail here. A reportable event, safety or security event, occurring on the transit right-of-way or infrastructure, at a transit revenue facility, at a transit maintenance facility or yard, or during a transit-related maintenance activity is the overarching criteria, but then meeting that criteria, it has to meet one or more of the reporting thresholds. Went too far, sorry. Okay. There are some exclusions to the applicability. Events that occur off transit property where persons, vehicles, or objects come to rest on transit property after the event are excluded. OSHA events in administration buildings, death from illnesses or natural causes, other events such as assaults, robberies, non-transit vehicle collisions occurring at bus stops or that are not on transit-owned property, excuse me, are excluded unless the person is boarding or alighting or at the time of the event, or it involves a transit revenue vehicle. And non-revenue service vehicles or supervisor vehicles, police vehicles, etc., collisions that occur while traveling to or from a transit-related maintenance activity while operating on the public roads. So those transit police collisions and things like that that occur out there are not going to be reportable. All right. So now what we're going to do is take a look at each of the individual thresholds. First is a fatality. This includes suicides that are confirmed within 30 days of the date of the event. One or more persons immediately transported away from the scene for medical attention, which meets the injury threshold. Property damage equal to or exceeding $25,000 or more. And evacuations of a transit facility or vehicle for life safety reasons. And then following a collision involving a transit roadway revenue vehicle, which results in either the transit vehicle or the non-transit roadway vehicle being towed away from the scene for damage incurred during that collision. Seems to be a delay in me advancing to the next screen. Okay, I'm sorry, oops. Okay, so here are a few examples of events that are reportable. Sorry, again, I went too far. I'm not sure why I can't advance very well. Try it this way. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. All right. So here are some examples of reportable events to NTD. Two people who are standing still when a transit vehicle starts moving and fall and are injured are reported. If a deadheading or out-of-service vehicle is involved in a collision, or there's a fire in the bus garage meeting a reportable threshold, those are also reportable events. Maintenance-related activities are included in the reporting. So here you see a few examples of maintenance-related activities that are reportable, such as a mechanic falling into a pit resulting in a fatality, or a maintenance employee hit by a vehicle in the yard and is injured. Less severe injuries to maintenance workers are captured on the S&S-20 monthly summary forms, along with your other non-major injuries. Now we have some examples of events that are not reportable. An employee injured on a city street or other property that is not transit-owned property, for instance, while they're on a break perhaps. A person waiting at a bus stop is hit by a random car, and that is not reportable since the person was not on transit-controlled property. Or an assault or robbery, again, that occurs when if the person's not boarding or alighting at the time, so the person's standing at the bus stop and they're assaulted or robbed, then that would not be reported, again, unless it was actually at a transit station. Okay. You'll remember that part of the event definition stated involving a transit revenue vehicle. However, NTD also collects non-transit collision incidents, such as an accident in the transit parking lot that meets a threshold. So a couple of examples you see here: a private vehicle collides with a pedestrian or another vehicle requiring immediate transport for medical attention would be reportable as a non-transit collision, or a private vehicle collides with transit property such as the transit station and it has $25,000 or more in damage. That too would be reportable as a non-transit collision. Okay, so we're going to go into each one of the thresholds in a little bit more detail. Fatalities is a death confirmed within 30 days of the transit-related activity. This includes transit-related suicides. Please do not include deaths resulting from illness or natural causes or those found deceased on property, unless, of course, it's deemed to be a suicide, then it would be reportable. The injury threshold, again, this is meaning that the person was transported away from the scene for medical attention. If they're not transported, we do not consider it an injury. This includes transport by any means, whether that's a private vehicle or by ambulance or a supervisor or whatever it may be the case. It does exclude a person walking away for medical attention. So the accident happened across the street from the hospital and the person walked over to the hospital. That's not considered transport, so they're not considered injured. Okay, a little bit more clarification here. Medical attention must be sought without delay after the event. Medical care sought hours or delays after the event does not meet the threshold and are not included. Medical attention must be administered at a location other than where the event occurred, meaning that minor first aid given at the scene is not considered injured. Medical attention due to illnesses should not be reported. For example, a passenger on a bus has a seizure and is transported to the hospital would be excluded. Sorry, I went too far again. I see my problem is with seeing the little advancing buttons. There we go. Or maybe one more. Okay, no, got that one. All right. Okay, so the property damage threshold, as you see, these are events with total or actual estimated property damage equal to or exceeding $25,000. The property damage includes the transit vehicle and the non-transit vehicle damage. It also includes any damage to stations or bus stop signs or shelters if applicable. The cost of non-transit property, private property such as buildings, fences, and so on, is also included, and so is the cost of clearing wreckage, if applicable. NTD requires only a general ballpark estimates, and you may use a variety of methods for estimating those costs. You can use Blue Book values, you can use actual repair amounts or insurance estimates. You can use established standard property damage estimates for specific event types or severity of damage. Many transit agencies create a list of standardized costs, so that's acceptable. Or these estimates can just be done on a case-by-case basis. Estimated damage excludes personal property such as laptops, cell phones, investigation costs, medical claims, litigation, and so forth. Property damage must always be reported on the S&S-20 regardless of the amount, including zero damage. They'll tell you if you include a zero damage and it's a collision with anything other than a person, you'll want to add a confirming statement as to why there is zero damage when there was a collision between two cars, for example. So if there isn't one, we will request that you add one. Oops, uh-oh, I clicked on the wrong thing. Let's see here. Should be right here. Okay, sorry about that. All right, so automatically reportable collisions. If there's a collision involving a transit roadway revenue vehicle, which results in either the transit revenue vehicle or the non-transit vehicle being towed away, it's automatically reportable. This is limited to roadway vehicles and therefore excludes ferry boats or trains. For example, a transit bus and a car collide. There's no injuries or fatalities, and the property damage is only $1,000. But the car is towed away from the scene due to disabling damage. That makes the event reportable. The towaway is not based on the severity of the damage, just that the vehicle was damaged during that event and was towed away. Okay, the next threshold is evacuations. All evacuations for life safety reasons are reportable. Life safety means that there is imminent danger to all people in that environment. This includes both directed evacuations or customer self-evacuations. Self-evacuations are where customers vacate the property without the direction of a transit agency or other authority. Some examples of life safety reasons are suspicious packages, bomb threats, smoke events, fire, fuel fumes, noxious odors, or a person brandishing a weapon on a transit vehicle. If a bus, for example, has a transmission problem and the passengers are put onto the sidewalk or the shoulder, the transmission problem is not a potentially unsafe situation, and therefore that would not be considered an evacuation for life safety reasons. Evacuations are fairly uncommon for collisions, but there could be a fuel leak or similar type of life safety situation. Okay, so how do we report these reportable events? We do so by creating an S&S-20 form, and this just gives you a rundown of where you would click to get to your safety forms, as James showed you a little bit earlier. Once you're on that view, you see the File New S&S-20 button. If you have an event to report that includes 2 or more transit modes from your agency, how do you choose which mode to report under? If the event involved your rail mode and your non-rail mode, one of your streetcars and one of your buses, you want to choose the rail mode. And if the event is between 2 non-rail modes, like your bus and the paratransit, you use the predominant use rule, which in the case I just gave you would go to the bus mode rather than the paratransit, because typically your bus mode is going to have more ridership than your paratransit does. Okay, so the first 2 screens will act as a wizard to help determine if the event meets the reporting thresholds. So screen 1 captures the date of the event, the mode, the type of service, and the event type. And this is a screenshot of setup screen 1. Then on setup screen 1, the various event types include, first of all, a collision. And again, this includes suicides or attempted suicides by transit vehicle impact. The next option is fires. Again, fires require the act of suppression. Smoke or burn odor events meeting a threshold would be reported as an other safety event rather than as a fire. I went too far again. Apologize. Go back up. Okay. So the next option would be hazmat spills. For an event to be considered a hazmat situation, it not only has to meet the threshold, but the situation would also have to require specialized cleanup crew, such as a hazmat team. Acts of God refers to acts of nature, such as hurricanes, floods, tornadoes, snowstorms, and other natural events. There are two categories of security event types. They are system security events, such as arson, bomb threats, burglaries, suspicious packages, and so on. Basically, these are events that affect the transit system itself. And then there's personal security events, such as assaults, robbery, rape, homicide, etc., that affect one or more persons. Again, this includes suicides or attempted suicides that does not involve contact with the train, since those would be reported as collisions. But this might be an event that in the transit station or some other or the transit vehicle that are deemed an attempted suicide or suicide. All right. And then we have our final category, which is other safety events. These are events that don't fit into any other categories and event types that we just spoke of, but they still meet a reporting threshold. So this, again, might be an evacuation due to smoke, or it might result in a fall in a transit center or transit station that resulted in a fatality. You will notice that the injuries of 2 or more people has an asterisk next to it there. Remember, for other safety events on the major event form, 2 or more injuries are required if that's the only threshold. Therefore, if there's only 1 injury in this other safety event, then another threshold must exist in order for this to be reported on the S&S-20. So, for instance, it might have to have, in addition to the injury, it may have to have an evacuation or a fatality. All right, then on setup screen 2, the first portion asks you a series of, well, it asks you a series of questions, and this is what's going to determine if the event is reportable or not. The first is the number of injuries and or the number of fatalities. Next, it'll ask you the total estimated property damage amount. Then there's a question asking the evacuation threshold question. If the event type is a collision, then you're also asked the tow-away question. You'll be asked if a transit revenue vehicles are involved, which determines if this is a transit collision or a non-transit collision. So this is a snapshot of setup screen 2. All right, so a little bit more detail about some of these questions. Excuse me. If you select yes to the were transit revenue vehicles involved in this in a collision, this would also be a proper selection if you are reporting for PT operations. We sometimes see this. You're doing demand response paratransit, and they'll say no because it's not their vehicle. It's the agency that they contract with or their provider. But you are doing the reporting for that, so you would want to say yes for that question. You would select no for this question when the collision involves a private vehicle on transit property or a transit non-revenue vehicle collision that occurs on transit property. These are typically maintenance type collisions that might happen in the yard or similar location. Okay, so based on the selections you've made on setup screen 1 and setup screen 2, the system will respond accordingly. If the event is reportable as a major event, the basic information screen will appear next. If the event is not reportable as a major event, the system will generate a message that the event is not reportable and ask you if you want to continue. So at this point, you can either edit the selections that you've chosen on screen 2, or it may tell you that it's just not reportable with the selections that you've made. Of course, if you have any questions about that, please feel free to contact any one of us. So if the report meets the criteria on the first 2 screens, the next screen to appear is going to be that basic information screen. The basic information screen displays the date that you already selected back on screen 1. Then you enter the time, and be sure to use your AM and PM designations, even if you use military time format, which I know sounds a little bit crazy, but you still have to use it for it to capture that time correctly. The approximate or actual location of the event is included. The geographic location, longitude and latitude, is required. You are permitted to enter numbers, a decimal point, and a negative symbol for the longitude. Please enter a minimum of 4 decimal places in entering either the longitude or the latitude. And if you don't have the coordinates, you can use a variety of internet sources. One such site is latlong.net. I like this site in particular because it's very easy to use. This is a snapshot of the lat-long screen. You can see across the top, you can go address to lat-long, or you can put in the lat-long to the address. And basically on this screen, which is address to lat-long, you just type in the address or the milepost or whatever it may be and click on find, and the longitude and latitude appear in the boxes adjacent to the right, and then you can just copy and paste them into your report. Okay. Most important piece of information on this screen, in addition to the lat and long, is the event description. The event description should be concise but descriptive so that the analyst can understand what happened, how it occurred, and should include the number and type of injuries or any fatalities. But please do not include any personal data such as names, badge numbers, license plate numbers, driver's license numbers, anything like that. We're going to ask you to remove them. It's personal identifiable information. The description box contains 2,000 characters. If you exceed the 2,000 character limit, when you go to click on next to go to the next screen, it's going to pop up and tell you that you've exceeded the character limit. Basically, at that point, you just have to edit until you get beneath the 2,000 character limit. It doesn't tell you how many characters over you are. Excuse me. Please do try and refrain from using code because we don't always know what your code means, especially Vehicle 1, Vehicle 2, or IV, which we see in a lot of reports. It's really much better for us if we can discern which vehicle is the transit vehicle. So if you do identify Vehicle 2, 3, 4, whatever there are, at least identify the bus separately or the paratransit vehicle separately. So bus, and then you can use your Vehicle 1s, Vehicle 2s. So that just makes it a lot clearer for us, and we don't have to send it back and ask for a question. So there's an example of here of a clear description that tells us everything we need to know to be able to validate the report, including the fact that the vehicle was towed. Also very helpful information to include. Okay, as I just mentioned, you do not want to include personal identifiable information. We started excluding this last fall, so please refrain from using this in your descriptions. Again, when we come across with that, we will ask you to remove it. And if anybody's curious, the reason for this is because there's talk of making the event descriptions included in our publicly available data. And obviously, they don't want to have people's identifying information included in that in your event description. Okay. All right. The basic information screen also includes boxes for attempted suicide and suicide check boxes when the event type is a collision. So please ensure that this is corroborated by the same checkboxes on your injury or fatality form accordingly. The last piece of information on the basic information form is the name and phone number of someone to contact for additional information regarding the event. You do not need to enter your name there, and you don't need to put in police officers and things like that because we're not going to contact them. Traditionally, we contact the person that submitted the report to us or who we know is the safety contact. If you do put in the phone number, please just use the digits. If you put in parentheses or dashes or periods in between, it just ends up cutting off the phone number and we can't see it anyway. So also, as James pointed out to you, this basic information screen shows a progress bar across the top, so it lets you know how many more screens you have to go. All right, and this is a screenshot of that basic information screen. Okay, so first we're going to review all the details of reporting a collision since this is the most common type of event. The collision screens will vary slightly depending upon the selections that you've made on setup screen 2. Typically, there's 4 screens or subforms, if you will, that will appear when you're reporting a collision. So that would be the collision event information screen, the collision information screen, the transit vehicle involved screen, and, if applicable, the other vehicle involved screen will also appear, or screen or subform. This is a snapshot of the collision event screen. So let's go through these options now. So on the collision event form, the first thing question that's asked is the number of transit vehicles that were involved in the collisions. This is the number of buses or transit vehicles that was involved, ferries, whatever the case may be. You would always answer yes to this question unless 2 vehicles from your transit agency collide. The location of the event, such as a transit station or an intersection or a grade crossing or a bus stop, service stop, non-revenue facility, so on, is the next piece of information that you include. Bus stop or service stop is an appropriate location for modes, including the demand response. So when you stop at a service stop to pick up that person, even though that service stop may be the hairdressers or the mall or the person's home, that's still considered a service stop. A few things to keep in mind when you're reporting the collision information. Ramps, streets, highways, freeways are all reported as a roadway, not grade crossing or intersection. Please do not select other and type in highway or interstate or freeway or something like that. You tell us that later on down in the form. So at this point, it's just whether it's an intersection or not is the most common thing we're looking for there. Grade crossings are locations where tracks and vehicular traffic intersect, such as at the corner. Bus or service stop, again, as I mentioned, is appropriate for all of your bus, demand response taxi, Vanpool selections. Parking lot entrances, exits, and driveways are not reported as intersections. For those, again, you'll want to use the selection for roadway, not grade crossing or intersection. I think I went too far. I don't know how it went all the way over there, so I'm apologizing. I don't know. Okay, there we are. Okay, the next selection on the event information form is the collision with. So this is where you indicate what the transit vehicle collided with or what collided with the transit vehicle, such as another vehicle, a person, an animal, fixed object, whatever. A collision with a bicyclist, a pedicab, a person in a wheelchair, or a person in a electric type scooter is all reported as a collision with a person. Larger scooters like small motorcycles, mopeds, school buses, dump trucks, so on and so forth are all going to get reported as a collision with a motor vehicle. Again, please do not use the other selection and type in school bus. Again, you'll have an opportunity later to tell us what type of vehicle it is. In multiple impact collision scenario, the collision with is the first object or vehicle that was collided with. For example, a bus collides with a car, and then the car goes on to hit a building. The collision with section would be motor vehicle, and you would include the damages to the building that was struck in the event description. The last selection is the number of other, these are your non-transit vehicles that were involved in the collision. Please remember that this is not the total number of vehicles that were involved in the collision, only the number of non-transit vehicles that were included. So don't include the transit vehicle in this number. So let's look at a few examples of how to determine how many other vehicles to report. If car 1 cuts off a bus, but no contact was made, and the bus goes on to hit a car 2, the number of other vehicles to report is 1, because only car 2 had contact. Car 1 hits car 2, and then car 2 goes on and hits the bus, then the number of other vehicles to report is 2. Again, both car 1 and car 2, in this case, had contact. Just a reminder, we do collect non-transit vehicle collisions that we mentioned earlier. Here are a few examples of the non-transit collision. A privately owned vehicle collides with a pedestrian or private vehicle or object in a transit parking lot. Privately owned vehicle collides with another privately owned vehicle on a ferry. A transit non-revenue maintenance vehicle collides with anything or anyone on transit property. And on the non-transit collision form, you would include the non-revenue vehicle as the other vehicle on the other vehicle form. So this is a screenshot of the non-transit collision event screen. And this is a screenshot of the collision information form, which is the next screen to appear after the event information. Now we'll go over this in detail. So the collision information screen captures information about the conditions at the time of the collision. For all modes, it captures the weather at the time of the collision, whether it was clear, raining, snowing, etc. It collects the lighting. One selection there is twilight, which is used to report the time between dawn of dawn and dusk, when it's not full light out and it's not full dark out yet. Please be sure that your lighting corroborates the AM or PM time you entered on the basic information screen. If the collision occurred in a tunnel or an indoor facility, please use the indoors selection. This selection is not used to indicate street lights or lights on a platform. When you're reporting the roadway configuration, there's a few things to take into consideration here. You would select limited access highway to report an incident on the freeway. A limited access highway is one that has access limited in some way or another. For example, it may not allow pedestrians or bicycles. Again, please be sure that the selection you make here in the roadway configuration is consistent with the location you chose back on the collision event information screen. We have created a new internal check that will automatically select the roadway configuration as intersection or grade crossing. However, this cross-check does not happen if the report's been saved and then somebody goes back in and makes a change. It doesn't go back and re-cross-check that. So if you go in and change one thing, like roadway configuration, just make sure again that your location is still corroborating your choice or your new choice, as it were. If you choose the roadway intersection or grade crossing, the system will generate the two categories for intersection control device and grade crossing control devices. If the event did not occur at a grade crossing, you're going to choose not applicable. Conversely, if it did not occur at an intersection, you would choose not applicable. So the point is that between these, intersection control device or grade crossing control device, one of them is going to be not applicable. All right. At that point, we've completed the collision information screen, excuse me. The next screen that would be presented would be the transit vehicle involved form. One screen will appear for each transit vehicle involved. So if two buses from the same transit agency collided, you would complete one transit vehicle information form for each bus. The form identifier, the form does include an identifier count. So you'll see vehicle 1, transit vehicle 1, transit vehicle 2. And you have buttons on the form for increasing or decreasing the number of transit vehicles if you've made a mistake. So this is a screenshot of the transit vehicle involved form, which we're going to go through in detail now. Okay, so first thing the form captures is the vehicle type, and now the vehicle fleet involved is, instead of reporting the type separately like you have to do in 2019, the form is linked to the A30 form, which I'm going to show you this on the next screen. So let me just go through the list right now. So you captures the vehicle type, it captures the fleet involved, it captures the vehicle action at the time of the collision. Was it stopped or turning or what? It collects the collision type. This is the part of the transit vehicle that was impacted from the point of view of the transit vehicle. And it also captures the speed at the time of the collision, and it asks the question whether the vehicle was towed or not. Okay, so as I mentioned, let's go into each of these a little bit more detail. The new Fleet Involved section integrates with your agency's most current A30 Revenue Vehicle Inventory form. There are separate A30 forms for each mode and type of service that you report for. With this integration, you choose a vehicle from the list of your available options. When a selection's made and the vehicle, then the vehicle type and the fuel types are already part of that selection, and this way you don't have to manually select those. They'll automatically pop in with the vehicle that you choose. If you're operating a new manufacturer that is not in your agency's A30, you'll have the option to enter it into the form. However, adding a vehicle to the collision form does not update the A30 form itself. If you have questions about the A30 form, please contact your agency's annual analyst. So this is a screenshot after clicking the Existing Fleet button. The grid displays the available options from your A30, as I mentioned, for the mode that you're reporting for, with columns representing the Revenue Vehicle Inventory ID, the RVI ID, the Agency Fleet ID, the total vehicles, the vehicle type, the model, the year manufactured, and the fuel type. Some agencies may have many selections, so you can use one of the 4 filter boxes to reduce the grid and show only certain ID numbers or certain vehicle types or certain manufacturers, however you filter it. To select a vehicle from the fleet, you click on the checkbox located at the left of each one of the available options, and then on the lower right you click on the button that says Add Fleet. Soon we're going to see, this may have actually already happened, but you may see a slight change in the columns. We've asked them to get rid of the total number of fleets when it actually enters it into your screen. We've asked them to get rid of the total number and actually show that agency fleet ID information, which is a little bit more beneficial for the reporters for actual vehicle identification. Okay, so as I mentioned, if the vehicle is not listed in the existing fleet, you may add a new vehicle by clicking on the New Fleet button. The grid will display drop-down boxes for you to select the vehicle type, the manufacturer, and the vehicle fuel type, just as you used to do in the 2019 forms. These are a list of all options and are not restricted to the agency's A30. And then after you make your selections for the three criteria that you complete, then you click on the Add Fleet button. Again, note that adding the fleet is not actually adding it to the A30. Those would have to be done by editing the A30 itself. Okay, so if existing fleet is chosen, this is the screenshot that you would see afterwards. So if you realize that you made a mistake in choosing your vehicle, you would want to click on the red X at the bottom of at the right-hand side of your selection. That will remove it from your form, and then you can go back to the existing fleet button, or you can go to the Add Fleet button, whichever is necessary. Okay, so let's explore the transit vehicle action options. When the transit vehicle is moving into or out of a scheduled service stop, you want to report the action as either making a transit stop or leaving a transit stop accordingly, and report the transit vehicle speed to indicate that the vehicle was moving. Again, do not choose this option if the vehicle wasn't moving. Making a transit stop means you're actually moving. If you're not moving, then you're going to want to choose either stopped or parked. It sounds kind of, I don't know what I was saying. It seems like it'd be pretty simple, but we do see quite a few reports where they'll say making a transit stop, even though they've said in the event description that it was moving. So just check that against your event descriptions. Okay, the collision type. So this diagram shows the impact points that are reported to the transit vehicle, again, from the point of view of the transit vehicle. So we're going to look at some of these options in more detail on the next few screens. All right, so rear-ended means that the rear of the transit vehicle was hit by the front of another vehicle. Rear-ending means that the vehicle was traveling forward and it hit the rear of another vehicle, say a private vehicle. So you do not want to report that as head-on or other front impact. And also note that rear-ending and rear-ended, when you report these between your bus and your private vehicle, whichever way you're reporting it, they're always reported as a pair. So if you said rear-ended for one vehicle, then the other vehicle is rear-ending. If you said rear-ending for one vehicle, don't report other rear impact for the other one, always as a pair. Okay, side impact means that the transit vehicle was impacted anywhere along the side of the vehicle, including the doors, mirrors, or tires, with the exception of when it's a side swipe situation. Other front impact is used when the front of the transit vehicle is impacted, but not when it would be considered a head-on, straight-on, head-on collision or a rear-ending. And an example would be the front corner bumper hits another vehicle or an object while it's turning. It's not referring to the bumper that's on the side. In that case, it would be a side impact. Likewise, the rear impact refers to the rear end of the bus, but not when it would be considered rear-ended. An example would be if the transit vehicle was backing up and it hit a utility pole. That would be a time when you would choose other rear impact. All right, sideswipe is used when two vehicles are parallel to each other, going in either the same or opposite directions and kind of bump and scrape along the sides of each other. Both vehicles in that case would be reported as a sideswipe. Please note that you cannot use sideswipe as an impact point when you're reporting a collision with a person. FTA has deemed that sideswipe, people cannot be sideswiped. So if they hit the side of your bus while it's moving, then you want to choose side impact. When you're reporting a T-bone or a broadside collision, one vehicle is reported as head-on, the other vehicle is reported as a side impact. So in the diagram, excuse me, the vehicle number one, which is the other vehicle, would be reported as head-on, and the transit vehicle number two in the diagram, would be reported as a side impact. Okay, chain reactions. These can sometimes be a bit of a challenge to report. Remember to consider the first impact or collision type in your analysis. So in this diagram, vehicle one would be reported as rear-ending. It's doing the original hitting. Vehicle two was that, in that case, is therefore rear-ended because it was hit in the rear, which that caused it to move forward and get pushed into the transit vehicle, which would also be reported as rear-ended. So obviously the vehicle number two in the middle is getting it on both ends, but you want to consider what happened first. First it was hit in the rear, and then it hit the transit vehicle. For the speed, the actual or Speed at the time of the collision should be reported. The actual speed is unknown. You can use the posted speed for that section of the road, and you can adjust for vehicular traffic or road conditions at the time of the event. Please be sure that your estimated speed corroborates your choice for the transit vehicle action. Okay. The towaway question, again, is the last option on this form. Was the vehicle towed due to disabling damage as a result of the collision? Again, just be sure you choose yes if applicable. And we'll go on. Okay. The other vehicle involved information. You have less information to report on the other vehicle. This screen gathers the information about that non-transit vehicle or vehicles that were involved in the collision. If more than one other vehicle is involved, you will need to complete one other vehicle involved information form for each motor vehicle that was involved. Again, for example, transit vehicle causes a multi-car collision with two autos. You're going to complete two other vehicle forms. There's also on this form a place for you to increase or decrease the vehicle count if you've made an error. So this is a snapshot of the other vehicle involved form. The form collects the the type of other vehicle. This includes an option for non-revenue vehicles. You'll also see, you'll report an automobile, which would be used for both cars and passenger vans like Dodge Caravans. You'll also see things on here for buses or charter buses and various options. It also collects the other vehicle action or movement at the time of the collision. Just as when you're reporting the transit vehicle collision types, you're indicating the part of the vehicle that was hit from the point of view of the other vehicle. This form also includes the tow-away question. Excuse me. So answer yes or no accordingly. Please select no if the vehicle was towed because the operator was taken away or the operator just wanted the vehicle to be towed. It must be disabling damage as a result of the collision, even if that disabling damage was just a flat tire. So that concludes the collision event information screen. So if your event includes any injuries or fatalities, you'll need to complete a screen for each one of these people. These forms, like the vehicle form, include a person count, and it also includes buttons for increasing or decreasing the number of people. Person type location categories are divided into two groups, people outside the vehicle and people inside the vehicle. Excuse me, so please be sure to choose those carefully. One thing we often see is collision reports where the transit vehicle operator is reported as being outside of the vehicle, which is obviously not usually the case. Again, just note that there's two vehicle operator selections, one inside the vehicle, one outside the vehicle. Transit vehicle rider is the correct choice for choosing passengers that are boarding or alighting the vehicle at the time. The form also includes an attempted suicide and a trespasser checkbox on the injury form and a suicide and trespasser checkbox on the fatality form. Please be sure to select the location in the checkboxes accordingly. You may check both the suicide or attempted suicide and the trespasser boxes as needed. Trespassers are people that are in unauthorized areas, typically in facilities. Just as with attempted suicide, if there are police reports, eyewitness statements, or to account for the trespassing, please include that information in the event description. Using the keyword trespasser or trespassing is very helpful to the analyst for validating the report. Trespassing events are not reported on the event level, and trespassing is not a threshold. Rather, we collect trespass or injury or fatalities. For example, a person may be trespassing in an unauthorized area of the transit center when they're injured, such as an employee designated area. And this is a screenshot of the fatality form. The red arrows are showing you the two transit vehicle operator selections. Again, just to make you well aware of the fact that there's an inside the vehicle and outside of the vehicle categories. And the injury form looks essentially the same. Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn this back over to James.
Thanks, Ann. All righty. All right, so we are going to look at evacuation forms on non-collision event forms and editing. Earlier we discussed evacuations. Evacuations can be included in any event type, but are less common in collisions. If an evacuation is incorrectly included or excluded, you cannot add or delete it from a report. The entire report would need to be deleted and a new report entered with or without the evacuation. The evacuation subform includes a verification question to confirm the evacuation was for life safety or potentially life safety condition. Please do not answer no to the evacuation question. If evacuations is not for life safety, then delete the report and create a new one answering no to evacuation question on setup screen 2. This is the screenshot of the evacuation subform. In the evacuation details section, you include a brief description of the evacuation, including the cause. The what was evacuated question is used to indicate what was actually evacuated. One choice would be vehicle or vessel, which would mean the bus or the vehicle. Do not report the location of the bus or ferry at the time. And the last question asks if this was a self-evacuation. For example, a self-evacuation is when passengers get off the transit vehicle without being told to depart. Reporting fires on the S&S-20 that meet one or more major event thresholds. To be defined as a fire, the incident must have had fire suppression equipment or personnel involved to contain the fire and must meet a major event threshold. Without these thresholds, a fire requiring suppression is reported on the S&S-20 non-major summary report. Arson is reported on screen 1 as a system security event, not a fire. The presence of smoke, no fire, and no suppression is reported as an other safety event. Here's a screenshot of the fire event details screen. If the fire is in or on the vehicle, including in the engine, wheel area, or anywhere on the outside, this would be reported as in or on vehicle. Report the type or cause of the fire. For the fuel type selection, if you chose the location of the fire as in or on vehicle, then you would report the fuel type of the vehicle. Acts of God are natural and unavoidable catastrophes that affect the transit environment. Select all locations of property damage, injuries, fatalities, and evacuations. You will be able to choose more than one option. For example, the location should indicate the property or properties that were damaged and not the geographic location, such as the name of the city. This is a screenshot of the Act of God screen. When reporting hazardous material spills, the spill must meet a reportable threshold and have caused imminent danger to life, health, or environment and required specialized cleanup. A couple of examples of what is not reportable as a hazmat event. Oil, brake fluid, etc. from a transit vehicle. There's most likely not enough fluid to meet a threshold. Another example of what is not a hazmat event, a bleach container carried onto vehicle, breaks open, and the vehicle is evacuated due to fumes. This is reported as an other safety event because no specialized cleanup was used. However, there was an evacuation. Here's a screenshot of the hazardous materials spill screen. You see you report the location of the spill and the type of material spilled. There are two categories of security incidents on screen one. System security or personal security events, which must meet one or more of the following thresholds. System security events occur on transit property and affect the transit system as a whole. Personal security events happen to individuals on transit property or those boarding/alighting a transit vehicle. This is where you would report suicide or attempted suicide that did not involve impact with a transit vehicle. Here's a screenshot of the system security event screen. You may notice that there is an other system security event option on this form. This would be to capture security events that do not meet any other category. For example, shots fired at or objects thrown at a vehicle. Here's a screenshot of the personal security event screen. You will notice that there is an other personal security event option on this form as well. The final major event type is other safety events. This is your miscellaneous category. These events must meet one of the following thresholds: one or more fatalities, two or more injuries, property damage of $25,000 or greater, or an evacuation. Please note you may report an other safety event with one injury if another threshold is met. Here are some examples. An evacuation of transit property due to smoke, fumes, or noxious odor. Any fatality on transit property that is not considered a collision or suicide. 2 people thrown from their seats due to a hard brake. 3 people injured when an escalator comes to an abrupt stop. Other safety events resulting in only a single injury reported on the S&S-20 monthly summary form. This is a screenshot of the other safety events screen. So at this point, we've completed all of our screens for the reportable event types. Let's review saving, submitting, and editing. At any point from the basic information screen on, the system automatically saves your report. So if you close the report without saving or submitting from this point on, these auto-saved reports become pending reports, which are stored as a task on the task menu option. When you are ready to complete the report, click on the task menu option and you will see a listing of each task. Major event report tasks will appear on the S&S with S&S-20 in the title. Just click on the task and the system will return you to the screen you were on when you close the report. Complete the report and save and submit. Or if you no longer need the report, you can choose to delete instead. Save or submit options appear when you're in view form mode. If you do not see save or submit button, click on the view form button and scroll to the bottom. Once you click on save, the report is saved and is given an event number at the top of the report. The report stays open so you may review it. When you submit a report, the report will close and return you to the dashboard. Submitting the report releases the report to the validation analyst for review and comment. It also notifies the analyst that a report has been created. Otherwise, we may never know one has been created. If we see an unsubmitted report and it is past the due date, we will contact you to submit the report. Please note that unsubmitted reports are excluded from the event, injury, and fatality counts on the S&S-20 CEO Certification form. Analysts may return a report to you for questions or to make corrections. The system will send the last modified user one email for each report that is returned. After you make corrections, please be sure to save and submit. The comment box is included in all forms except the S&S-20 CEO Certification at the bottom of the respective form. This box is used by safety analysts to ask for clarification or a change request. Each time the form is returned, it is time-stamped. Users may also respond to a request using the comment box. However, you do not need to comment that you made the change. We will see that in the form. If the analyst asks you to add a statement to the event description, please enter that statement in the description and not the comment box. When reviewing or editing your reports, it's important to learn how to move around the document. Here's a list of the available button tools, though each button may not be available on every form. One shortcut I would like to point out is the Jump To button. This button allows you to jump to a specific screen instead of using the next or back buttons. Excuse me. The View Form button shows the entire report for review and contains the Jump To buttons and Save and Submit buttons. When you open the report for the first screen you see is the Setup Summary view. This screen is the only place you can edit the date of the event. Also, if your report does not include any injuries or fatalities, this screen is the only place where you can add them. Then you would click on Next, which displays your report in View Form mode. At this point, you can continue to use Next to go to each screen, or you can click on one of the Jump To section buttons, which are shortcuts to specific screens. This also enables the editing mode. So if you need to edit a report or a certain section of the report, you'll need to click the Jump To button at the top of that section to edit. As a reminder, Save and Submit only appear in View Form mode. Always submit after editing. If you opened a report and did not edit it, just click on Close. If you delete a report that was not requested by your analyst, please notify us. Analysts track the number of reports an agency enters and the total number of reports each week. Not only do we need to know why the report was deleted, it saves the analyst from trying to locate which report was deleted when our tracking sheets show a different number than the NTD screen. This concludes the presentation. If we have any outstanding questions, we may be able to answer them now. If we don't get a chance to answer your question, or you don't have a chance to ask your question and prefer to ask us in a one-on-one session, please feel free to contact either of us after.
Thanks, James. There is one open. Oh, I spoke too soon. There are no currently open questions. So we could
just answered it.
Oh, thank you. If we just wait another minute, see if any more questions come in. I know this webinar is a long one, so don't have a lot of time to spend on questions, but email addresses are on the screen and are on the last page of the handouts. You should have a copy of those.
Okay. I saw Graham's question. I started to say something about that. Let me just see if I can capture it, Graham. Okay, so securement, when it says securement issue, excuse me, securement means the securement of the wheelchair. So if the wheelchair is not properly secured and it starts, rolling around in the back of the van or the bus or whatever it's in, and the person is injured and they're transported away from the scene, that's when you classify it as a securement issue. Okay, whether they fell out of the seat, whether and injured themselves, whether they hit their hand on the rail, whatever the case may be. Not a securement issue is just a person that's on the bus. Maybe they tripped over somebody's foot and fell down, hit their head, they're transported. They tripped over somebody's stroller, again, fell down, hurt their hand, transported. So that's really the distinction between securement issue and not securement issue. Securement pertains to the securement of the mobility device. So hopefully that gets it. If not, please type some more, or you can call me afterwards. We can talk about it some more. Maybe go through some scenarios.
Great. Thanks, Ann. Gonna hit done on that. We'll wait another minute or so, and then we'll wrap it up. All right. I don't see any more questions coming in. Sorry if you're typing frantically, and I'm gonna start to wrap this up. I think that was a sufficient.
Well, let me say thank you, everybody, before you just typed a question to the follow-up, the tire. Okay, let me see.
Who was that from? Amy. Scroll down the answered questions.
Yeah, I did answer a question about it. Someone, Amy asked me, maybe you can find it, Lori, while I'm talking.
I am looking.
About if there was a collision and the car had a flat tire, and the operator of that car, the driver of the car, gets out and changes the flat tire himself. Okay, so if that's the case, it doesn't meet the tow-away threshold. Now, I don't know whether anybody in that scenario was injured on the bus or the operator was transported from the bus or anything like that. But as far as the flat tire is concerned, if the operator changed it and it wasn't towed, it doesn't meet the tow-away threshold. And if that was the only threshold that could have been met, it's not reportable. And you're going to have accidents that aren't reportable to NTD. You could go around a corner and your mirror hits a light pole, it knocks the mirror off, and that's it. That's not going to be reportable to us unless the bus is towed for that reason, which is unlikely, but maybe that happens. I don't know. And that would be the only case in which case that would be reportable, because it wouldn't meet the $25,000 threshold. Oh, I see 4 questions in now.
Yeah, I'm seeing.
Do we have time, Lori? Or should...
Well, I'm here. If you guys are here, want to keep answering.
Well, I'm here.
You can. Okay.
Just trying to see what the question is. Can you please explain who uses the detail form from the major event reports and how they use it? Primarily, I was going to see if I saw your name there, but I can't quite tell what it is. We do. The analysts do. That description tells us what happened. And that's why it's very important to include all the information about the collision that you can. I can't tell you how many reports that we see that come in will say, car hit the bus. Okay, it doesn't tell me anything except that the car hit the bus. I don't know where it happened. I don't know how many people are injured. I don't know if something was towed, so on and so forth. So as we mentioned earlier, it's just very helpful to us to be clear. Now, with that said, the reason we're excluding personal identifiable information from forms is because FTA is considering, under Freedom of Information Act, publishing the event descriptions in our published products. Currently, event descriptions are excluded from our public products that James had mentioned earlier. So that's what's done with the event descriptions right now. It's just for us, for analyzing the data, but it could be publicly available information. No, we don't give it to any third parties. This is not used in any litigation. I know people have asked me that lots of times over the years. It's not given out to lawyers. It's not given out for any kind of litigation. It's not published anywhere. A person would have to have access to the NTD database to look at any event descriptions, and even then, they can only look at their own. They can't look at any other agencies. So it's not distributed to any third parties. Now, it may be part of the information that's distributed to Congress because Congress decides the apportionment, but I don't think they usually factor in descriptions. They're looking at injuries and event types, fatalities, and so on. How do you use the weather and the lat long? Again, just for identifying the purposes. They are working, I believe, on an interactive map, which will help, which is what the lat long is, will be and can be used for, to determine if certain intersections or problem spots are things like that. The weather, that's only for validation purposes. And again, we do a variety of analysis. Somebody might ask us, we want to know how many bus collisions you had between this period where it was raining outside or it was dark outside or whatever. So we do provide, do analysis for like that for FTA and other government agencies, as well as just about anybody. It kind of depends on what it is. There are certain transit institutes that ask us for various analyses, things like that. If it's just a person or like a reporter or something asking for information, we don't do that. That goes up to FTA headquarters, and then they determine if that request is going to be made. But again, usually those event descriptions are not excluded. It's just stats. I don't know
back to the flat tire
means. Yes, a flat tire. Let me say this one more time. Still have 138 people in here. If a car and the bus collide and the car gets a flat tire as a result of this collision, and the car is towed away because of that flat tire, that's considered meeting the tow-away threshold, and it makes the event automatically reportable. No injuries, no real property damage, no evacuations, meets the flat tire criteria. Not flat tire criteria. It meets the tow-away threshold if it's towed away. If it's a flat tire and it's not towed away, it's not going to meet that tow-away threshold. I think there's one new one.
Oh, I think that's it.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
All right. We'll just remind everyone again, you can email any more questions. We're nearing the 2-hour mark, so I'm thinking we should just wrap this up. Okay. So
thank you, everybody. Sorry
yes.
for my ineptitude in the dancing
stop.
slides.
It was fine. It was totally fine. Please don't
I'll get better.
Don't be silly. I mean, you will get better, but
thanks, everyone.
So yeah, thanks everyone for participating. A special thank you to Anne and James and Dylan manning the Q&A box there. We really appreciate your time and this informative presentation. A reminder to the attendees still listening, you will get an invitation to fill out an evaluation survey. Please just take a couple of minutes and fill that out. We really appreciate your feedback. Everyone have a great Tuesday afternoon and be well. Bye.
Thanks, Lori.
Bye.